British MPs have accused London's Metropolitan Police of a series of failures over the News of the World phone hacking inquiry. The Home Affairs Select Committee has also criticised News International's attempts to obstruct investigation into hacking. British Prime Minister David Cameron is due to make a statement in Parliament tonight. For more on the inquiry and the road ahead, I'm joined now by Nick Bryant. He's the BBC's Sydney correspondent. Well, Nick Bryant, a couple of days ago we were talking about this was going to be a moment of high drama, Rupert and James Murdoch getting this grilling. How do you think it all fared?
Well, it was certainly that, and the moment of highest drama, I sense, was a kind of watershed moment. That was the moment, of course, when the protesters stepped forward and tried to plant a custard pie on Rupert Murdoch's face. And I sensed, in the 10-minute recess that followed that, I think the energy of this story changed. Certainly the demeanour of the MPs grilling Rupert and James Murdoch changed. They suddenly became very apologetic. They've been very critical up until that moment. When Tom Watson, he was the Labour MP who gave Rupert Murdoch such a grilling in the opening phase, tried to resume his questioning at the end. He was cut short by John Winningdale, the chairman of the committee. I think that was a key moment. And listening to the coverage coming out of London this morning, it seems to have shifted from a story that gripped the nation to a story that has become a Westminster Village story. That's to say, it's of great fascination to political correspondents and insiders, but perhaps it hasn't gripped, it's not gripping the attention of the nation today as it was in the lead up to the parliamentary hearing.
Rupert Murdoch said he was humbled and ashamed, but he said, "I'm not responsible." How do you think that that's going to go down with the British public? Are they going to accept him on face value and perhaps move on, as you seem to be suggesting?
Well, I think a lot of people will be surprised and shocked that Rupert Murdoch and James Murdoch had such a loose sense of what was happening at News International. I mean, given that Rupert Murdoch's history with these papers, these have been his pet papers, really, around the world, the News of the World and the Sunday Times. And for him to be unaware of what was going on, I think many people would have been slightly surprised by that. Although I think, again, that moment where the protester attempted to pie him, well, perhaps there would have been a bit of public sympathy from after that.
So do you think it's shifting now from scrutiny, still, you know, there's still a police investigation underway after all, but perhaps scrutiny is shifting now to the police themselves and the politicians? Well,
the Home Affairs Committee, there are two parliamentary committees looking into this. Rupert Murdoch appeared for the Culture Committee. There's also the Home Affairs Committee, which looks after policing. They've been damning today in their assessment of the Metropolitan Police's handling of this whole investigation, and in particular the man who led up the inquiry, Andy Hayman, who went on to get a column at the Times, Rupert Murdoch's newspaper in Britain. They've also been very critical of News International for willfully blocking that investigation. So they have been very strongly critical. But as I say, I just think some of the energy has gone out of this story, and you've got to remember it's late July in Britain. Parliament will be in recess. They've been brought back today especially for this. They'll all go on holiday, as will a lot of the country, and I think that sort of creates almost a natural break for this story, and some of the energy has just dissipated.
Well, the British Prime Minister David Cameron is expected to make a statement to the House of Commons in a few hours. Do you think anything that we saw at the inquiry overnight moved this scandal closer to the door of Number 10? Do you think he's still got some questions to answer?
One thing happened at the inquiry, one thing happened outside the inquiry. The thing that happened at the inquiry was that it was revealed that David Cameron had been offered a full briefing on this from the Metropolitan Police, and his Chief of Staff said that won't be necessary. That was seen as a way of kind of protecting David Cameron from this crisis, sort of distancing himself from the problem. The other revelation was that the former deputy editor of the News of the World, a guy called Neil Wallace, who's caused so much problems for the Metropolitan Police because they hired him as well, that he worked on an ad hoc basis ahead of last year's general election campaign, helping Andy Coulson, who was the former editor of the News of the World, who was also the director of communications at Number 10. So those are two questions for David Cameron. But Kim, it could have been much worse for David Cameron. Sir Paul Stevenson, who resigned as Britain's top cop on Sunday, was very critical of David Cameron in his resignation letter. He didn't repeat that criticism in the parliamentary hearing. If he had done, I think the pressure on David Cameron would have been much greater. As he arrived back from Africa, he would have been under much more severe pressure from the Labour Party and indeed from the press.
So not even the revelation from Rupert Murdoch that he met David Cameron shortly after the election and was asked to come in the back door so nobody would see him, that doesn't matter?
Well, the whole choreography, that was fascinating, wasn't it? But equally, Gordon Brown had asked him to come through the back door as well. I mean, the Brits have known that Rupert Murdoch's had this extraordinarily close relationship with successive prime ministers. I mean, mean, everybody's tried to court Rupert Murdoch in Britain. That won't come as a great shock. Kim, there was a scenario. The BBC employs a producer at Westminster called Gobby, and he's the guy that shouts, "Minister, when are you going to resign?" Now, there was a possible scenario where David Cameron would have got off the plane from Africa overnight, and Gobby would have been there shouting, "Prime Minister, are you going to resign?" That question won't be asked today, and that's crucial. Sir Paul Stephenson could have really created problems for David Cameron if he had repeated what he said in his resignation statement. He didn't. He backed away from that, and I think that's reduced the pressure on Downing Street.
After his appearance, Rupert Murdoch issued a statement to his staff saying he had the utmost confidence that News Corp was actually going to emerge as a stronger company than before. Now, a few days ago, you were saying you detected this real shift in power in Britain. Do you think that shift is a permanent shift, or is it things going to go back into place?
Rupert Murdoch's lost one of his crucial organs in Britain, which is the news of the world. That has had real clout in Britain. I think the sort of editorial influence of the whole news limited stable has been diminished through this as well. I'd stick by that. I do think there has been quite a major shift in power. And I think that was reflected in the demeanour of Rupert Murdoch yesterday. I mean, I was of the Murdoch generation. I've grown up believing this man exerted extraordinary power in Britain, and indeed he has. And yet the man we saw yesterday was sort of unrecognisable from the Murdoch of popular legend. And I think that was one of the key things to come from this hearing. I mean, the metaphor of the moment in Britain is obviously the Wizard of Oz.
Indeed. Nick Bryant, thank you very much.